In today's episode, we are talking about the new college baseball recruiting process. And I say new because it's a little bit different now. The NCAA's made some changes, made some rule changes, and college coaches, because of the transfer portal, are recruiting differently. So we're going to get into some of those details in this episode, how that impacts you as a player or as a parent. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some of the specifics of what college coaches are looking for when they're evaluating pitchers, when they're evaluating hitters. And so I think the combination of all those, this episode is going to be very impactful if you're someone who is in the current college baseball recruiting process or you're about to be in the recruiting process. Okay, so if you don't know who I am, my name is Patrick Jones, and I'm currently building a college baseball recruiting service to impact 1,000 families in the recruiting process. My background is I've been doing this recruiting service for 4 years now, but I'm a former hitting coach in the Baltimore Orioles organization. I have a podcast called Patrick Jones Baseball, and I've had over 250 college coaches on my podcast. So I've been able to learn the ins and outs of each division and what that entails and what coaches are specifically looking for. And most importantly, just building relationships with coaches. I attended Xavier University and played college baseball there. I attended Moeller High School and played on a great team there, which is a ton of fun. And then I'm the founder of Patrick Jones Baseball, and my website is patrickjonesbaseball.com. So I always like to start out with this graphic because this graphic to me shows just how competitive it is to play college baseball. So you have about 500,000 high school baseball players out there. And of those 500,000, only 10, 12% end up playing college baseball at any level. And of those 10, 12%, only 2% out of that 500,000 play Division I college baseball. So 2% out of that 500,000 play Division I college baseball. And so I always like to show this to players, and I always ask them, like, hey, are you working like the top 2%? Because if you're not, how could you ever expect to be in the top 2%? And of course, everyone thinks they're working like the top 2%. If you ask 10 players, who's the hardest worker, they're all going to raise their hand. But at the end of the day, they know deep down if they're working as hard as they possibly could be. There's a lot of things you can and can't control about the recruiting process, but your effort is one of them that you can control. So some of the recent changes, first, we're going to start off with the new Division I roster sizes. So the previous roster size was 40 players on a roster. So Division I level college coaches were allowed to have 40 players on a roster. Starting in 2025, they're only allowed to have 34 players on a roster. So that's 6 less roster spots. So that means there's going to be less recruiting going forward from high school kids because there's less room in general. And so again, that just made everything become even more competitive at the Division I level because now there's just less roster spots. There's no other way to put it. So now we're going to get into the initial contact timeline. And some of those rules, you may have heard of some, you may not. It's a good refresher either way. So at the Division I level, college coaches can start contacting you August 1st heading into your junior year. August 1st heading into your junior year is when Division I college coaches can begin contacting you. It's important to know that most will not be contacted on August 1st heading into their junior year. The majority won't be, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're not going to play Division I college baseball. It just means that coaches haven't had the chance to even see you yet. The Division II level, they can begin contacting players June 15th heading into their junior year. Now, they won't necessarily start recruiting players heavily then. I'll get into when they'll start doing that. But that's when they can begin contacting players at Division II level. And before I go any further, just want to note that you can attend camps before then. You can talk to coaches before then. But this is when they can start contacting you. So at Division I level, it's August 1st heading into your junior year. At the Division II level, it's June 15th heading into your junior year. And then at the Division III, NAIA, and JUCO level, they don't have, honestly, like hardly any rules when it comes to this. And the reason is because they know most players want to go play at the highest level that they possibly can. So they don't go and try to chase down sophomores in high school because they know every sophomore in the country wants to go play Division I baseball if they can. So they usually just wait and see who's left over by the time their timeline comes around. And so now we're going to get into that actual timeline, recruiting timeline for each division. So at the Power 5 level, that's going to begin, as I said, August 1st, heading into junior year, when they first can start talking to players. They'll start offering certain players right away. Again, this is Power 5, so we're talking the best players in the country. And then usually at the Power 5 level, their recruiting period is going to start there, and it's pretty much going to wrap up by the time the players are entering their senior year of high school for that class. It's important to know, too, that there's going to be outliers like anything else. This is just, for the majority, this is going to be the timeline. There's going to be outliers. There's late bloomers. Things happen. But for the majority, this is the timeline, starting at the Power 5 level and moving to the other divisions. At the mid-major level, that's going to start just like Power 5, August 1st. And then it's probably actually going to end, it's going to sound crazy, but spring of your senior year. And I say that because of the new rule changes, where there's going to be less roster spots. College coaches, mid-major college coaches specifically, they're going to be more patient. So they're not just going to throw offers out left and right just because they have less roster spots. And they also have the transfer portal with that. So they have that in one of their hands. And so they're allowed to be a little bit pickier. So they're going to be a little bit more patient. Now, if you're one of the top players, of course, they're going to offer you right away. But I was talking to a recruiting coordinator the other day, and he's like, the thing is I'm going to evaluate my current team at the college level throughout the spring. And based upon what I see there is how I'll recruit current seniors in high school even, and what players I decide to offer. Because he said I'm going to continue to follow specific players. And so I'll still offer them even into their senior year, just based upon some of the changes that have gone on. So just wanted to throw that in there. And then at the Division II level, that's going to start spring of their junior year. So even though Division II coaches can start contacting players June 15th heading into their junior year, most of the time they're not doing that a ton, because they know that, again, kind of like I was saying earlier, every kid at that point still is going to hold out for Division I. So they're just not going to spend a whole lot of time. They're going to wait until the Division I gets all the players that they want. They'll start a little bit, maybe a little bit earlier in their junior year, especially if certain players reach out and become interested, or if they attend their camps and the player shows interest first. But for the most part, it's going to start spring of their junior year, and then it'll end spring of their senior year at the Division II level. Division III NAIA and JUCO will start normally summer entering senior year, and then it'll end summer after senior year. So even the summer after their senior year, there's still spots that are open. Players are still playing and in summer ball, and so they'll still have some players who will commit to schools even after they graduate high school that summer and still playing summer baseball. So that's the general timeline, recruiting timeline for each level. So now we're going to get into like what college coaches are specifically looking for. Before I go any further, I want everyone to understand something, okay? I'm going to even move this more in the middle so you can, and I'm going to blow myself up so you see me and hear me loud and clear. This can be a very frustrating part of the recruiting process for a lot of people out there, because what ends up happening is you go and play well in front of coaches. You see players who play well in front of coaches, and you think you're better than them, and you just don't understand why, because your metrics are just as good as them and everything else. Here's the deal, okay? The recruiting process is very similar to dating, okay? And here's why, okay? I'm going to give you an example. In the dating world, let's just say I have two friends, okay? I have two friends, and I'm setting up these two friends on a date, and I think they'd be a great match together, similar personalities, interest, everything. I think it would just be perfect. And so they go out on a date. I talk to one of the people, and they say, "Oh, everything was awesome. I would love to see him again. Like, it was great. Like, we had a great conversation." And I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. I go and talk to the other person and they're like, I just wasn't feeling it. The connection wasn't really there. And so I was like, oh, was it their personality? Oh, nope, great personality. Do they just have different interest in you? No, actually, they have the same interest. Well, what was it? Like, I don't really know. I just not feeling it. That's how a lot of this college recruiting process goes for players. Is you may be good enough and coaches may not be able to specifically give you something specific, because that's exactly what everybody wants. Is they want to know specific what is it that I need to change or fix. Or going back to that dating example I just gave, I'm sure if I told that first person who wanted to see them again, hey, they don't want to see you anymore, they would have said, well, what is it about me? Like, what specific is it? I talk too much? They want to know so they can fix it. But the other person doesn't even know, because the connection just wasn't there for them. And so even though that can be frustrating, understand that's part of it. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means that college coaches have recency bias, where maybe you remind them of another player that they had and it didn't work out. Maybe it's another situation where you played one way one day, the next day you didn't have a good, who knows what it is. We can make up all kind of different scenarios, but that's how I want you to view part of this. Is it's not personal, it's not something that you necessarily did, it's just certain coaches just get a connection, and sometimes you don't necessarily even know why, and heck, some of the time they don't even know why. So I just wanted to start out with that before we go any further. All right. So now we're going to get into some actual specifics of what coaches are looking for. The first thing, they value left-handed hitters more than they value right-handed hitters. Here's why. And I wanted the same thing too when I first started helping players in the recruiting process and having my recruiting service 4 years ago. Is I was like, man, like, why? I don't understand. Because at the college level, college baseball, the best pitchers out of the bullpen late in the game when the game is on the line are predominantly right-handed. And so because of that, because you're not facing left-handed pitchers with the game on the line, you're facing right-handed pitchers, it makes more sense to want to have left-handed hitters. Because I was a right-handed hitter, and I'll be honest, if I'm facing a pitcher on the mound who's right-handed, the game's on the line, he's got a nasty slider, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to pick that up than it is a left-handed hitter. And so because of that, a lot of coaches prefer left-handed hitters. And so that's just something to know. You may be just as good as another player, but if they're left-handed, they're going to have the upper hand on you. Now, that doesn't mean if right-handed hitters aren't recruited. I mean, I actually have a kid right now who's a right-handed hitter in a 26 class. He's got 15 Division I Power 5 offers, and he's right-handed. So it doesn't always mean you're not going to get recruited, but I think it's important to note that left-handed hitters are more valuable to college coaches. I think you're great no matter what. And so here's an example of a coach. Even just a text message I screenshot. He said, Patrick, I like this player as a defender, but so offensively. And again, in a perfect world, we had this middle infielder, and they're left-handed, right? Of course, it's left-handed. Now I'm going to talk about the best player versus the best prospect. I would say parents have the hardest time with this, because I'll have so many parents all the time like, oh, so-and-so is hitting, 475 with OPS, RBIs. And it's like, I don't even know if that's good or not, because I don't know, like, who were they facing? What were the actual hits? I mean, there's so many things that you don't know, especially when you're playing high school baseball or travel baseball even. The competition was against someone throwing 95 the whole weekend, or was it 82? And so because of that, a lot of those numbers don't mean a whole lot at times. So just because you're the best player, or you have the best stats on your current team, doesn't mean you're the best prospect. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be valued as highly among college coaches. So don't view that just because you are hitting 320 and someone else on your team is getting recruited and they're hitting 300, that's not fair, because coaches they care, but they don't care about your numbers. They care about how you're going to produce for them, because that's what they care about, is winning games. And so understanding that, I think, is hard for some people out there, but I think it's important that I bring that up. Usually this is how it works, is pitchers and then players up the middle go first when it comes to who gets the offers, who's getting the interest. And then usually it's going to be corner players and then it's outfielders. All right. So usually that's the timeline. Good pitching. Of course, everybody, you can't have enough good pitching. And then players are up the middle, the catcher, shortstop, second base. And then outfielders are going to go last at times. And of course, this depends if you're an outfielder or a corner player with a tremendous bat. It's going to be a little bit different. But for the majority, that's how that is, because you have to look at it from a college coach's standpoint, especially as an outfielder. If you don't hit, you're not that valuable, because they can put a shortstop in the outfield and be probably just as good. And maybe you're a little bit better here and there defensively because you have more experience, but it's not as dramatic as we like to think. And that's coming from myself, who was an outfielder. So trust me, I have all your outfield, all you guys are your backs who are outfielders, but that's just how the process works. Here's an example. I talked to a coach recently about a player, and I just said, hey, this is a Division I coach, and they said, do you think he's D1? He said, just because of his position, he's an outfielder. There's always going to be portal and JUCO kids out there, and so because of that, we're going to be patient. We're going to wait. This is going to be probably one of those players for them who they're going to evaluate all the way until spring of his senior year. That's just the way it works. There's nothing wrong with that. So power and consistency. So power from a pitcher standpoint, that's going to be velocity. As we can imagine, it's going to be velocity, but it's also, I would say, from a consistency standpoint, is going to be locating it, which we'll get into. And then I would say on top of that, we're also going to add in a breaking ball too. So you got to be able to have some sort of breaking ball that you can throw for strikes. Now, it doesn't have to be this nasty of like this pitch right here, but having a breaking ball to go with your fastball and be able to throw them both for strikes, very, very important. And so for a pitcher standpoint, the power is going to be the velo. The consistency is going to be strikes. We have to be able to throw strikes. So usually the way I like to look at it is like 1 walk every 2 innings is going to be average. 3 walks per 9 innings, very good. And then if you're only walking 1 or 2 guys per 9 innings, you have elite command. And so that's very good. So this is one way where you can utilize stats from a pitching standpoint to understand where you're at from a consistency standpoint of being able to control the strike zone, throw a lot of strikes as a pitcher. So from a position player standpoint, we'll start out with power, which is the obvious, the exit velocity, but we also have to evaluate other things as a hitter. It's also, or a position player. So it's also arm strength. It's also speed. So from a power standpoint, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at those 3 main things, and we're evaluating those. And I would say the biggest difference amongst players at each level, from Power 5 to mid-major to D1 to Division II, is going to be power and consistency. That's what separates. More power, more consistent, you're going to raise yourself up to having more and more options. That's just the way it is. And I think this is a good graphic just to show. I pulled this off from University of Texas baseball, but their average weight, 197 pounds. 197 pounds. And so I think a big part of this is it is important to look the part. It's very important to look the part. It doesn't matter whether you like that or agree with that or not. What matters is it's true, and coaches are going to be more attracted to you the more you look the part, and they feel like, hey, we can just bring him in. He's going to fit right in right away from just looking like everybody else too. And so from a consistency standpoint, from a position players, it's going to be, hey, how often are we just barreling up the ball? Good hitters hit, and the best hitters barrel up the ball the most, and they make the most loud outs. They're lining out all the time. They should be lining out more than anybody else because they should be barreling the ball up more than everybody else. They're making good swing decisions. They can control the strike zone. They can make the routine play. Everyone talks about the diving play, and that's great and all, but can you just make the routine play? That's important. And then having some baseball IQ on top of that too. I mean, this is how you can play faster. This is how you can have more range. This is how you can get more outs and get noticed even more than your current speed or metrics or arm strength or anything, by just understanding the game and having a high baseball IQ. And of course, I don't care who you are at any level. What separates hitters is swinging at good pitches and not swinging at bad ones. And you know what I mean? Like swinging at strikes, taking balls, as simple as that is. And that's what separates hitters the higher up you get in this game. And this is something that you can't look past, but I mean, just being a good teammate, it's easy to be a good teammate and be happy for everybody when you're 4 for 4. But what are you like as a teammate when you're 0 for 8 or when you're 0 for 10 and you just struck out the end of the game and you're in maybe a little slump or whatever? Are you still a great teammate and cheering everybody on? That's the separator for a lot of people, because here's the thing that players don't understand and overlook at times. These coaches are going to be with you 6 to 8 hours a day, 7 months out of the year. And so they want to be around good people. They want to be around people who have good energy, because that's who they're going to be around. And so you want to be somebody who gives off good energy and doesn't take and it doesn't take energy from other people. And so give off good energy, be a good teammate. So now we'll get into showcases. And so what I decided to do is I took showcases in camps, and I messaged one of my buddies who's a Division I college recruiting coordinator, and I said, "Hey, if you're a parent, what would you recommend for showcases in camps in terms of how many, when should they go?" And so that's what we'll talk about here. And so Prep Baseball Report's going to be the showcase that he recommended. And so this is his exact text right here. I'm not going to even read it for you because you can read it. But essentially what it's saying is, like, you don't need to do anything until the summer heading into your sophomore year from a showcase standpoint. And then maybe your summer heading into your junior year, you do one. And then from a college camp standpoint, you don't need to do anything until fall of your actual sophomore year, and then heading into your junior summer too. So that was his advice. Now, it's going to be a little bit different depending on what level you're projected at. If you're more of a D3 player, this can actually be even held off even a little bit longer. So that depends on what type of player you are. But from a generic standpoint, this was the advice that he gave. So I just highlighted this for you, like one event heading into sophomore year, one event heading into junior year, and then one event fall of junior year. And then from a camp standpoint, fall of sophomore year, summer heading into junior year. And then those are only the two for the camp standpoint. So don't feel like you have to go from camp to camp to camp and then showcase to showcase. You don't have to. So now we're going to talk about researching schools. I think this is something that players need to take the initiative more on. And I think there's definitely some things that you can do that shouldn't take too much time. Like, everyone lives near different colleges, no matter where you're at. And so understanding, what you like, what you don't like of schools. Do you like big schools? Do you like small schools? Figuring that out, I think, is very important. And so take a tour of colleges, even if you're not going to want to go there. It's still good to just take a tour and be able to, maybe there's certain things you like more or don't like as much. And then look at different size schools on top of that. You don't necessarily know until you go and visit. You may think you like a certain school, a certain size school, but it's important to go talk to people there, look at different size schools, even go to a game and see the level of competition, especially at the lower levels. You think that there's not as much good baseball there, but I can promise you there's some incredibly good players at those levels. The last thing we're going to talk about is how do you actually get found? Because that's the thing, right? At the end of the day, it's like, oh, we know all these other things, but like, how do coaches actually go about finding us? And so, like, there's a couple different ways. Like, one, like social media. Coaches will utilize social media to help them collect leads on players, and so they know who they want to go watch. And there's different ways to go about tweeting about that. Ian McDonald's the head coach at Indiana Wesleyan and puts out some great content when it comes to college recruiting process and how you should go about posting on social media. There's tournaments. I would say that coaches, maybe they're there to watch somebody else and they see you play on top of that. So that's another one. There's camps and showcases that you can go to, and that's how you become, on someone's radar. But by far, the number one way is trusted contacts. And that could be college coaches, college, or that could be travel coaches, that could be high school coaches, that could be college recruiting advisors, which is, that's something that I am, a college recruiting advisor. And so, and the reason why is because of trust, because there's so many players out there and coaches have such limited time that if they have somebody that they know they can trust and like they recommend a good player, then they're going to check them out. And versus I just having anybody go out there and just send them, say you need to go see this player, that player, people they trust, it matters a lot. And so, that's something that, again, I am a college recruiting advisor. And so people ask, how do I go about actually helping players? And so the first thing is just an evaluation, is like figuring out where your skill set matches up best to just right now, because that can change. You go somewhere and you put up numbers with the transfer portal and everything. So what level is the best fit for you right now? And then what's that recruiting timeline going to be like? Understanding what you need to improve on, and then, supplying you with anything from a resources standpoint if you need help to improve on that. And then just giving you objective information. I think it's hard when you're in the middle of this from a parent standpoint, from a player standpoint. It gets emotional because fear and dreams are at stake, two very powerful words, I would say. And so having somebody who's kind of that third party who looks at it from more of an objective standpoint can be very beneficial too. And then for myself, I've been able to be very lucky, as I said, to have developed relationships with college coaches at various levels, from Power 5, mid-major, D1, D2, D3, NAIA, and even JUCO on top of that as well. And so I also, try to figure out like, okay, I'll go and I'll ask programs like, what are they looking for a specific class? And so if they're looking for a catcher and I think you're a good fit for that, then that's how I send your information and connect you with them, and I'll recommend you to that coach. And then on top of that, I'm getting feedback from college coaches on their evaluation of you. And so seeing what they think of you, whether that be, I send a player to a camp, what'd you think of them there? That type of a thing too. So you're hearing it right from the horse's mouth, because at times coaches are going to tell you one thing if you ask for what they thought, but they're going to give someone like myself, the hands down truth on where they're at with you in the process. And so this is just one of examples of, I'll reach out to coaches and just say like, hey, like one of my players at your camp, just want to know what you thought of them. And so again, we can get that feedback and then make plans from there. So reach out to college coach on your behalf, and then also call or text with questions to coaches. Then you can also call or text me with questions anytime. And so that's how I go about helping players in the recruiting process. And if you want to know if you're going to be a good fit for my recruiting service, what you can do is you can head to patrickjonesbaseball.com/recruiting, and then you can sign up for a time slot. So it's 30 minutes for $60, and I'll do an evaluation of you. I'll answer any questions you have. And then at the end of the call, if you feel like, and I feel like we're a good fit to work together, then we can talk about next steps for my recruiting service. Hope you enjoyed this episode. My name is Patrick Jones, and I'll see everybody next time.